No-code is the laughingstock of the web dev and testing community. This is what web automation looked like back in 2004 and how the software industry continues to do it today. And surprise, surprise, this is what web automation looks like now if you're trying to do it with RPA or no-code platforms. All thanks to the biggest meme in no-code, this futile fantasy of automatically generating a selector simply by pointing and clicking on visual elements on the web page. You know, elements like text for web scraping, input fields for filling details, and buttons for submitting forms, most of which web devs have specifically labeled to support website testing and screen reading tools. And these auto-generated selectors are just hilariously janky and outrageously wrong. They're not even fit to be training wheels, since they're harder to learn and encourage every single bad practice possible. For starters, they generate long selector chains, rely on nth indexes, and are heavily tied to flaky DOM attributes like responsive classes. And let's face it, if auto-generated selectors are really such a fantastic approach, why haven't any web devs or QA engineers switched over yet? And do you know the most insane part of all this? The software development industry already has powerful web automation libraries like Puppeteer and Playwright, which they mostly just use for testing and QA purposes. On the other hand, no-code developers are relying on brittle auto-generated selectors to perform critical, real-world tasks like data scraping or updating records. So why are no-code and RPA platforms brainwashing us into using such an unnecessary crutch when far better industry standard methods already exist? Maybe it's to sell AI features like computer vision and fuzzy selectors, which are irresponsible at best and dangerous at worst. Maybe they truly think this slow, buggy, and broken mess is actually a better approach since they recommend it in all their training material. Or maybe they're just deliberately preventing us from learning the truth that there's much better ways to do web automation to keep us trapped in this no-code hell forever. But the good news is, no-code platforms can actually stop you from doing selectors the right way. In this video, we'll explore the origins of web automation, why no-code platforms have got it all wrong, and how you can start using more powerful industry standard selectors. But before we get into all that, many of you might already be asking, Alice, are selectors even the best way to automate website tasks in the first place? That's a good question. And to find out, let's ask the community where all the unicorn 10x engineers thrive. Well, I guess we can wrap it up here. We should just use APIs. Wait, don't tune out just yet. It turns out that the real world is not that simple. Some applications are too ancient to even have an API. And if you're one of those no-code or low-code citizen developers, IT simply doesn't trust you enough to grant you the holy grail of API access. Even if you get lucky, your manager might ban you from using APIs for maintainability reasons. Yep, that's all from my sad personal experience. You see, while websites use APIs to do everything they need to do, like fetching data and sending requests, web devs still need a human touch in the final step of the development process. You know, actually testing the website from the perspective of a real user who physically types into fields and clicks on buttons. This is actually how web automation was born, with the invention of Selenium back in 2004, followed by its much improved siblings, Puppeteer and Playwright. But for our no-code automations, we don't really care about any human touch. We're even calling them bots, for Christ's sake, because we create them to get the job done as quickly and efficiently as possible. In actual fact, automated testing libraries aren't even the perfect fit for a use case, since they're opinionated towards user testing, but they're still miles ahead of any no-code implementation. So why doesn't everyone just use Playwright in the meantime and call it a day? I've already talked about how most RPA platforms are just re-skins over open source automation libraries. Video link down below. And you would think that it's a no-brainer from the perspective of RPA vendors to just steal some best-in-class web automation libraries and get decades of proven performance, reliability, and industry recognition for free. And that's exactly what one vendor, Robocorp, has actually done by bundling the Selenium and Playwright libraries into their platform, allowing any developer to start writing automations immediately. But it is quite eye-opening that the biggest players in the RPA and no-code industry have not adopted such an obvious approach. In fact, they take things one step further and even implement dark patterns patterns to manipulate users into bad practices. Take Microsoft's Power Automate, for example. Their visual selector builder pops up the very moment any web automation activity is added, which leads to some amusing scenarios where the visual builder can't detect anything on the page. Because Power Automate doesn't even support shadow DOMs yet. They don't even let you manually edit or type in a selector without going through the entire visual process and then digging through several more menus. UiPath goes one step further by automatically enabling computer vision, an AI element guesser, and fuzzy selectors, which defaults to a 50% accuracy score. But having a trendy AI sticker doesn't change the fact that it is just a black box slot machine designed to fail silently by matching the wrong elements, potentially destroying projects and costing companies millions of dollars. The only thing they're missing are flashing lights and buzzers to complete the degenerate gambler experience. And I think it's quite clear where their priorities lie. They're happy to let inexperienced users match more things, but they couldn't care less if they match the wrong things. They'd rather keep developers clueless so they struggle every time using their tools rather than teach them the correct approach that works 100% of the time in any codebase. In fact, some even claim that these inherently unreliable selectors can't survive web page updates. You know, the typo, spacing issues, and color changes that junior web devs are constantly fixing on management's whims. But this claim is utterly false because no-code selectors break all the time on UI changes. In fact, writing accurate selectors that can survive UI updates require careful consideration and a lot of experience. And no-code vendors clearly already know that their auto-generated selectors absolutely suck, because why else would they be teaching advanced developers about fine-tuning and custom selectors? But does this advanced training actually pay off? I mean, Power Automate even tells us that we can type in CSS selectors now, but the truth is, this so-called CSS selector can only interact with a single element at a time. On the surface, it sounds pretty harmless and a step in the right direction, but what about support for batch selection, XPath, shadow DOMs, and anchors? I'm left with mixed feelings about this because it's going to limit the growth of aspiring developers who don't realize that what they're given only represents a tiny part of the selector's functionality. So how can we access this functionality when our tools hide them from us? Thankfully, there is a ray of hope, a way for all no-code developers to access the full power of selectors. You see, almost every no-code tool lets you inject JavaScript directly into the browser and manipulate the DOM, without any of their ridiculous rules and restrictions. Well, except for the overhead of using their extensions over a headed browser instance, but it's better than the alternative. You can use XPath, which lets you find and match any website element, or the ubiquitous CSS selector, which can do almost everything XPath can do and more, but 100 times faster. And of course, you can use all the JavaScript methods that support batch selection, events, anchors, and shadow DOMs. Would you rather learn these simple concepts once and use them forever in any tool or codebase, or learn absolutely nothing and struggle every single time at the mercy of no-code platforms and their black box selector builders? In fact, did you know it only takes a few minutes to learn how to make the perfect coded selector? And to prove it, I have made videos that will start you on the right track no matter which RPA or no-code platform you're using. So check out this playlist for bite-sized tips and tricks to take control of your web automations. I'll explain how you can use just 1 or 2 lines of code to select any element, automate the entire page at once, and work flawlessly inside shadow and virtual DOMs. I'll see you there.